All right, how's everyone doing? I'm Rich CELENZA. Thanks for tuning in to the Rich CELENZA Show. WTF are you talking about? So what I want to get into today is actually something I've been going through a lot over the years. And I always say this when I'm traveling, because I travel a lot for work. So when I'm not around, everybody wants to meet up with you. When you're kind of gone, everyone misses you. When you're around, no one's got time for you, right? I say that all the time, and I kind of live that, which is kind of funny because I talk to people about this all the time, especially my friends and family members, but I've been turning my beat around a lot as well as far as making time out for people. And what I want to talk about in this podcast is learning to really balance out your life and really taking out time right now to go and spend time with people that you truly love, like really making the time to do it. And I understand everybody's busier than ever. And I might have done something related to this on a previous podcast, but I want to go over it again because lately, I can say for the last couple of years, I've been extremely busy. I visited like 500 cities in the last, I don't know, 2 years. And I really wanted to start making it a point to go out of my way because I lost one of my uncles, my dad's brother. So all my dad's brothers and sister, all his siblings have passed. So it's kind of interesting. On one side of my family, my dad's side, all my aunts and uncles that I grew up with, all my Italian aunts and uncles that I love very much, that I used to travel with, they were pretty wealthy, and they have condos in South Florida. They would go to California. They went to Italy. Wonderful. I used to call them the Italian Kennedys, and they've all passed, and it's just kind of heartbreaking because I think about them so much, and I wish, you hear these all the time. You hear the stories. God, I wish I had one more day with my. It could be your father, your mother, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, your brothers, who's ever passed in your life. When people are in your life or around, appreciate them every day. That doesn't mean you have to get consumed or be a pain in the ass. Even being a parent, I make fun of a lot of and I was like this too a lot. I think I was overbearing to a certain degree with my kids. I was you become a helicopter parent, they call it. You're always hovering over them. But I had a close friend of mine, Josephine from Sicily. She said, Rich, there's a difference between, being there for your children all the time, but also learning how to break out and let them become who they're supposed to become and giving them the freedom to do that. And it was interesting because I came from a divorced household where I was bouncing between a mother who wanted me to basically, I think to a certain degree, become a priest, and my dad who wanted me to be a nightclub owner. But I had the freedom to kind of go between both, and also coming from a divorced household, I got to spend a lot of times with a lot of my aunts and uncles and relatives. So, but now if you take my mother's side of the family, for the most part, my grandmother's still alive. I lost my great-grandmother and great-grandfather from Italy that I grew up with as well. And I've lost a couple cousins along the way because of different addictions or murder and things in that nature. But for the most part, we have a massive family. I don't even know. I say this all the time. Is there 150 cousins, 170? I don't know. But most of all my aunts, uncles on that side of that family and my cousins are still alive. But it's getting to the point where my great uncles, my great aunts, a lot of them fought cancer. They've won, including my mother, which is amazing. And they fought a lot of illnesses, my other Italian side of the family. And I was very fortunate. My dream was to go with two of my other uncles that were alive to Italy. And I did it. It was probably the best trip of my entire life, hands down. Something I always wanted to do. And I make it, and my grandmother's still alive, like I said. But my mother had my grandmother had my mother at 15, and my mother had me at 18. So I was kind of raised in. And then my great grandmother was around, who lived at 93. She was around until I was almost 40 years old. So me and my mother were. My mother raised me, obviously, with my grandparents as well, and it was kind of like me and my mom were almost like brother sister as I got older, to a certain degree. And people thought my grandmother was my mother. My great-grandmother was my grandmother, which she was. And I miss her all the time, too, and my great-grandfather. But, really take the time, and I talk about this all the time on my podcast and even my programs, is take time out now to, you hear the saying, you don't necessarily always got to tell people you love them. It gets corny or whatever, but just text them, call them. If you're in town, go visit them. And I've been traveling a lot, and I've been making it a point to really take the time out to see my cousins. I don't care if it's an inconvenience even for me to go later at night, or if I got to get up early in the morning. And I also make it convenient to see them, to go to them. Because I hear all the time a lot of people saying, you know what, the phone rings both ways, right? A lot of times, we do reach out to people and they seem like they're busy, which is fine. But a lot of times people do reach out to you and you don't realize you're blowing them off a lot more than you think. And it could be even on social media. You may have family, friends, relatives that say, hey, next time you're in town, stop by. They're throwing that out there. And a lot of times you're like, yeah, for sure. And then you go to town, you don't do it. And I get we have other things we want to do. Like even when I go to Chicago, I have a massive family. I still want to see my closest friends. I make it a point to see them. But I definitely make sure I'm going to be flying to Chicago to play Santa. I try to do that every year. And that, actually, I don't even spend Christmas with my own daughters. They spend it with their mother. We're divorced. But I get to go see my mother, and my grandmother still live in Chicago amongst all my other family members. And my daughters know I'm not doing that to hurt them. But I know my grandmother's not going to be around. Sometimes they would even go there with me. But their mother had 2 more children, 2 little boys, which are wonderful. So they spent Christmas with them. And I said, listen, that's less stressful for everyone. Spend Christmas Eve with the boys. You wake up on Christmas Day. That's their traditional thing. And I don't have to be an asshole and say, I got to have you this day or that day. If I do fly back, then we do our own Christmas. And I've even been in town where they'll do Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And then I'll get the kids at night for Christmas Day. Or I'm sorry, Christmas night, which is fine. But back to you trying to really figure out how to spend time, especially, I promise you, if you have parents and you love them, try to talk to them on the phone as much as you can. Try to just have the patience to deal with them. And I know it takes a lot of patience sometimes to deal with our parents. And I can assure you, I'm sure they're very patient dealing with you, raising you your whole life, because you look back at what your parents went through to raise you on every level, emotionally, physically, financially. I mean, how we depended on our parents, or if you were raised by whoever. Acknowledge that, really, even as you get older. I think we just take that for granted. I think I can't say a lot of men, but a lot of men, I think, just kind of get older, and of course they love their mom. They want to do things for their mom financially, or be there for them. But we kind of get wrapped up with our wives, our girlfriends, then our daughter, like I did my daughters, other kids, and they kind of take a back seat a little bit, which is understand. I mean, that's what they raised us to do. But I think as we're getting older, and at least my kids are 21 and 20, you get to the point where, hey, you know what, like they're growing. Now they're going to be starting their own thing. Who do I have really the most in common with, really, if I broke it down, is my parents. I did a podcast on it. I was programmed by my parents, yeah. And I'm very fortunate to have them both alive. Yeah, like I just mentioned earlier in the podcast, all my aunts and uncles, my father's siblings, all passed. And what's kind of getting really insane is my dad's very flamboyant. He drives a Zimmer and he just dresses a certain way. He was a nightclub owner and all this. And on my father's side of the family, he's like the last of the Mohicans, you know what I mean? He is the one. I take him to a wedding, everyone just, and he just did a speech at his last living sibling, his brother, wake, and people were going crazy for it and crying, because he's really, as far as that, he's the last of that generation, which is kind of interesting. My father always talks about how all the generations, have passed, and now it's on him. And then you start to think, or I do, like I'm next after him, right? When he goes, it's on me and my cousins. We're the next generation. But yeah, if you have daughters, or if you're fighting with people or your friends and you miss them with social media, try to reach out. I've been trying to do that with my dad's friends as well. Same with my mother. They're not very social media savvy, but sometimes they just will be like, hey, I wonder how this person's doing. And I just did this with my mother. She wanted to find an old friend, and after I researched it, she found out he passed, which was kind of heartbreaking, but at least she had closure. And, there's other people she has found as well, and she's rekindled the relationship, which is wonderful. Same with my dad. My dad just found a friend in Venice, Florida, that he didn't have any idea where he was at, and then he found another friend in Atlanta, which is great. It's not that they necessarily get to see them, but at least they call each other on the phone. And maybe in the future I will take my dad to go see his friend in Venice, because I don't know if my dad wants to drive there, or he may take a trip with me to Georgia to see his old close friend and his brother. I don't know if his brother lives there, but anyways, my point being is, yeah, if you have parents or aunts or uncles that are older that They seem lonely. Really, you don't realize how much value you bring to other people sometimes. And I just went and visited my cousin. She works at a Macy's in Wisconsin. She knows I don't like Wisconsin, but as a joke, because we're Chicago Bears fans. We're anti-Green Bay, but that's just because we love the rivalry. But she moved there, and I haven't seen her in years. And I went, on Facebook. She's like, "You never visit me," and I specifically was going to visit her anyways, and I was waiting for her after work. And we went and had coffee, and it was a blast. And I had to work late, but I was able to get out actually a little early. And regardless how far she wasn't that far, but it probably took me out of my way a couple hours. But was it worth it? 100%. Would I have done that before? I don't know, because I was always kind of busy. So 5, 10 years ago, no. Now, absolutely. I go to Georgia. I make sure I see both sides of my family, because I have a lot of family members on both sides. I even had family members I didn't even know coming in as well, who invited me out to dinner for my birthday this year. And I was like, hell yeah, let me go see my cousins. I love my cousins. We went to Durant's. I don't know if you've ever been to Phoenix. They have a great steakhouse there called Durant's. The guy, I think, was for Bugsy Malone, one of the blackjack dealers. Well, he left there, I think, went to Arizona, opened a steakhouse. You actually, if you go through the back, you walk through the kitchen to get to the restaurant. It's a fine dining restaurant, though. It's really cool. It feels like you're in the 20s. I'm not kidding. I mean, it really, I'd say the 40s, I should say, but really it's got that vintage feel. But yeah, I'm not going to go on and on regarding this podcast, but if you really have people out there you truly love, or you want to find even, it's what I find interesting a lot of times when people break up in relationships and stuff, and I talk about this in my program, Mastering Self-Confidence, where it's actually Mastering Self-Confidence, a blueprint to try and find the woman of your dreams. Even if you've been through a bad breakup or divorce, a lot of people get divorces and then they try to rekindle with their old exes, which a lot of times they were exes for a reason. Even though you may reconnect as you get older and you have, obviously everybody evolves. But a lot of people had no problem trying to go after someone they were attracted to or they were in a relationship with before, but they also had a lot of friends that they probably had a blast with that they won't reach out to. Either they're embarrassed or they just felt like they're bothering them or whatever. But I had one friend, and I remember when MySpace came out, and I got to kick myself in the ass for this one because I haven't done exactly what I'm talking about in this podcast, which I need a slap in the face. But when it came out, they're like, "Oh, you could connect with all these people, on social media, even if you had, all these different things on MySpace." I'm like, I'm going to do it for one reason. There was a friend of mine, I forgot his last name, that I worked with one summer, and his name was Terry. And I love this guy, but last time I saw him, we went to an Italian feast together, and we started drinking wine and stuff. And then I knew the people running the booth. They had lawn chairs out there. I laid down to take a nap because we were going to go out and gamble real late that night. And then he said he'll take off. This is really before cell phones. And he said he'll take off and come back. I woke up. It was real late, and then we just all took off. And I never seen him again. So, you fast forward 25 years, or 20 years, and I think about him all the time, and my cousins liked him, and a couple other of my buddies are like, "What happened to that Terry guy?" And what was ridiculous was I never got his last name. Or I forgot it, I should say. I knew it back then, I just forgot it. He ended up moving to Arizona. That's what happened. So to make a long story short, I said, I'm going to get on this MySpace to see if I can, and all the people I went to high school with, nobody knew his last name, and we didn't go to the same school together or the same town. But out of a fluke, MySpace ended up going, that's not what I'm saying, out of a fluke, but MySpace ended up going out, and then Facebook, and I said, God damn it, I got to find, one day, hopefully I'll, meet up with Terry one day. And I get, probably about 7 years into Facebook, a few years ago, 4 or 5, I get this thing, Terry somebody, and I'm like, okay, who the hell is this, who the hell is this guy I'm looking now? He's a man. You got to realize I knew him when he was like out of high school. We were all young. I mean, I don't know if he was in his late teens, early 20s. He was a young man. Now he's a man with a wife. And I'm like, who is, and I'm like, oh my God, this is Terry. So when I connected with him, I'm like, you son of a bitch, you piece of shit. I've been waiting to connect with you for my whole life. I forgot your last name. So now this is what's nuts. This is a typical asshole I am. I've been to Arizona, and I kept getting caught up being busy again. And he's the one person I haven't seen. The one person I want to see and more than anyone lately. And I told him, next time I'm coming to Arizona, I'm landing on your house by an airplane. I'm landing directly on your house like as a joke. But I can't wait to see him. And then obviously we've been following each other on Facebook. He had a child. He plays a lot of golf. he's just one of the greatest guys I ever met that I lost contact with. And I'm sure a lot of people had friends like that if they were grade school friends, high school friends. I moved out of Florida, so I was still in high school in Chicago at a Catholic high school, St. Joseph, but I was still doing summer schools in Florida. I wasn't the best student, let's put it that way. So I was going to finish my senior year, but I didn't like the school my father had me enlisted in. But I liked a lot of the guys there. So it's almost like I have two alumni high schools, but I graduated in Chicago. But to make a long story short, it was like I went to two different high schools at the same time, which is kind of funny in its own right. But then I moved to Florida. So what also happened to me in grade school and junior high, I left to go to a private school. Everybody else went to the public school. So I kind of still had all my old friends from 1st to 8th grade. And then they all went to a different high school. Then I met a bunch of different guys in high school. And then I moved to a different state. And then I ended up traveling all over the country, even as a young age, hanging out with mainly New York guys. And I hang out with a lot of Italians from Italy. Even older guys from Sicily, Naples, but it was mainly Brooklyn guys that I ended up connecting with more than anyone else, and some Florida guys, but they were mainly Italian guys. So, anyways, I tried to connect and see all these different types of people, and sometimes even friends from the past. Some I know that are sick. I've even gone to the hospital to visit them. In different states or cities, or go visit their family. And I'm not saying this to toot my own horn. It's just some people. One of the things about traveling a lot in a business is you miss a lot of people in life, right? A lot of things going on. My daughters are older now. I wouldn't have done this when they were younger. But what's interesting is I'm there. I'm not always at home. I miss things at home, but I'm always somewhere else to catch something else amazing. My mother always says when you get on an airplane, for the most part, unless it's just strictly work, but a lot of times you're getting on a plane, you're leaving someone, and that hurts. You're leaving that person's hurt, but usually on the other side of the airplane, there's somebody else waiting for you. And when you travel a lot, I just did this in Boston during the World Series, went down there, and then my friend had his 50th birthday party. One of my close friends, he was actually, our daughters are best friends, and then he moved to Boston a long time ago. So I was always hanging out with him and his two daughters, and I had two daughters. And to make a long story short, he got remarried in Boston, and I was there, and his wife invited me to their dinner party with just the siblings, and it was great. Like, if I didn't travel, I would never experience that. I had to fly in and spend the whole weekend there, which I could have flew home. But I said, you know what, I never see my friend. I love his family. And again, these are the type of things I'm talking about. And even if you don't travel or not, there's a lot of things probably going on locally that if you just put some time in and ask your friends, colleagues, and family members what's going on. Because I think, too, we get locked into just doing certain things with certain people. And it can be just our mom and dad or our siblings or even specific coworkers, when a lot of times there may be other people that want to spend time with you or may want to go to dinner with you. They just don't have the time or your schedules can't match. But a lot of times you can just be open-minded and send a text and say, hey guys, and I do this a lot, I'm flying in on this day. If any of the guys want to do dinner, I'll be open here. A lot of times they'll be like, hey, we're all too busy. One's got baseball with their kids, or one's doing volleyball, one's got this. But a lot of times they'll be like, hey, Rich, that doesn't work, but can we all do this? Let's do this. I'd love to see everyone. So we started kind of doing that. And there used to be an Italian group that met like once a month. This I wouldn't always say works. It may work in some areas with a lot of old buddies, but I'm in Florida, so it never worked where all these Italians get together, say, the first Monday of every month or whatever. It starts off strong, and then as time goes on, it kind of weeds itself out. But yeah, just reach out to the ones you love, and you'd be shocked then as time goes on, they're reaching out to you as well. And here's the thing, a lot of times you don't have time, just be honest about it. But when my friend just did this to me as well, I was coming in from Jacksonville driving with my girlfriend after Thanksgiving. He wanted to do dinner in our favorite one of our favorite Italian restaurants. A close friend of ours from Sicily owns it, and he lives pretty far out there, and I know I can catch it on the way home. And he was going to come to my side of town to eat somewhere he didn't want to go. And I says, where do you want to go? He said, well, I'll just go by your house. I said, no, let's go to our place, Stefano Nono's. I'll have my girlfriend drop me off, and then I'll just jump in the car with you. He's like, that's awesome. So I ended up doing that. I was going to Uber or Lyft home. He drove me home. And I just did the same thing with my buddy. I just landed Friday from North Dakota, and my buddy hit me up and said, I'm arriving at 7 o'clock. And I said, you're not going to leave, and I'm arriving at 6:30. And he said, let's go to dinner. And we ended up going to No-No's. This is, again, I ended up going almost 2 weeks, a week after 1 week. But, we reached out to each other, and we made it kind of work. We would have never even known that. And those are the type of things I'm just trying to say in this podcast. But put yourself out there. A lot of times I also see where people are complaining, saying, you know what, nobody ever invites us anywhere. Or, how come we never get invited to someone's house? Or we don't get invited to weddings. Or we don't. And then on the flip side, when I'm in Chicago, I hear everybody complaining, there's too many wakes, there's too many funerals, there's too many weddings, there's too many christenings, there's too many baptisms. So there's both sides of this. If you come from a large family, you may be exhausted and I get exhausted when I'm in Chicago because there's so many birthdays. My great-grandmother, she had, like I told you, I don't know how many grandchildren. Between the grandchildren that she had and everybody else's spouses, I think she had 2 or 3 birthdays per week. She was invited to doings every weekend. She was so kind of famous or popular, people would have to revolve their birthdays and parties around our grandmother and have to communicate in the old days to say, hey, is there a christening on this day? Because I don't want to have my christening that day because grandma won't show for that one. She may have to go to that one, or whatever the case may be. So it's very interesting. But I'm going to wrap it up there. But yeah, definitely start learning how to reach out. And like I said, the phone may ring both ways. I get it. A lot of people are always like, well, if they want to be with me, they can call me. Well, the same goes for you. But be sometimes the one to break the ice and say, you know what, I am going to text that person. I am going to call them and just be open-minded and say, hey, dude, I miss you. Or I'd like to see you. Or I want to see your kids. Oh, your kid still plays baseball? I want to go to a game. My friend just came in from Cocoa Beach. He had a tournament to go to. I just got into town. He was honest. I said, well, I have a gala to go to that, on Saturday night. The tournament was, he got in Friday late. The tournament was Saturday, and then they wrapped up Sunday. I said, Saturday, I can't make it. And he said, don't worry about it. Sunday's the tournament if you want to come. But I said, all right, can I do Sunday? And then we went back and forth. He's like, it's raining, the weather, it wasn't working. He's like, don't even worry about it. But that's one of my closest friends. But I still communicated with them. He knew I wanted to go. We just couldn't make it work out. Sometimes just be invited or reaching out. And the funny thing was, we talked on the phone after that. Before that, I went through all the things I would do in Cocoa Beach because I knew a lot about it, living in Florida. And then he called me when he got home and he said, that was so awesome, thanks for that. And then we talked about the whole tournament. So we still were able to communicate with each other, even though we didn't get to see each other. And that's really what it's all about, right? All right. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. If you get a chance, check out my Mastering Self-Confidence program. That was something I think I mentioned in this podcast about me trying to help men find the woman or women of their dreams, even if they've been through a bad breakup or divorce. You're listening to my podcast, but I also have a YouTube channel and a Facebook page. I got Twitter, LinkedIn, so you can check out my videos actually on YouTube. I post a lot of different things, mainly fashion, fitness, hygiene advice, some relationship advice as well. So, yeah. Try and reach out, my friend. You never know who's going to be there. Who knows? We may not be there tomorrow. You know what I mean? So, all right. Well, take care. I wish you nothing but the best.